Hello, my name is Tej van Pettinger from Economics Help, and today I'd like to look at panic buying, what causes it, and is it rational or irrational to panic buy? So first of all, panic buying is when consumers buy an unusually high quantity of good, usually in response to a fear over a coming shortage. So for example, in 2020 with the COVID lockdowns, people feared that the supply chains may be disrupted. So we saw panic buying of toilet rolls, pasta, all these non-perishable goods. And recently in the UK, we're seeing panic buying of petrol with reports of shortages of lorry drivers, causing people to get more petrol than usual, causing big queues and petrol stations to run out of petrol. So the causes of panic buying could be quite a few. First of all, it could be that we see reports in the media that this good is running out. And if you fear that a good may be running out, your rational response may be to go and buy it before it actually does. So many people will take the same rational view that they need to get petrol before it runs out. So this causes a much bigger demand than usual. People go out to fill up their cars, fill up the tank, but because there's a big increase in demand, and the suppliers can't meet it, then we get a shortage. And then petrol stations close, and so they become very visible signs that there's a crisis. And you know, when you see petrol stations closing and more news reports, then if you haven't bought, you think, oh, I better go and get some before it runs out completely. So even though there is still adequate supplies of petrol for normal buying, what happens is that the suppliers can't meet the unexpected large increase in demand, because it would be uneconomical to have huge reserves of petrol for these very rare cases of panic buying. And it's very difficult to stop this surge buying, because if a politician says there's no need to panic, everything's okay, almost kind of reverse psychology. People think, well, if a politician's saying there's no need to panic, why is he saying that? And we ignore that, and we tend to still see it as a problem. Now, is it rational to panic buy or not? Because one way of looking at it is what we've already said, that from your perspective, a rational choice may be to buy petrol before it runs out. Because if you fill up your tank, then there's no real financial cost, because you're definitely going to use the petrol. But if you leave it too late and you go to the petrol station and it's empty, you may have a very high cost of not being able to get to work, not being able to travel to where you want to go. So if you hear reports of upcoming shortages, even if you know that it's not a real underlying shortage, it may still be rational to get in there first. You don't want to be at the back of a queue for half an hour and then not be able to get it, because some people have been stranded. So this is a problem that the government and suppliers face. It can be a very rational response to go and buy more petrol than usual. However, you could still say that some panic buying is an example of irrational behaviour. For example, supposing you're quite a moderate user of petrol and you have enough in your tank to last you a few weeks. Now, if you're aware of the situation, you realise there's a temporary crisis because of panic buying. And so there's going to be queues and maybe shortages for the next few days. Now, a rational response may be to think, well, I don't need petrol in the next few days. I don't need it for a few weeks. So therefore, rather than queue up and waste time, I will wait for the crisis to be averted. But if you queue up just because everybody else is queuing up, you could argue that's an example of herd behaviour. You're basing your decisions on what other people are doing, not whether it's in your interest or not. However, another way of looking at it is to say, well, everything a consumer does is rational from their perspective. So for example, supposing you have trouble with anxiety and you're spending all day worrying about whether your car will run out, you may feel that spending 10, 15, 20 minutes in a petrol queue is worth it for the peace of mind that the next few weeks you don't have to worry about getting a petrol. Maybe a crisis would come up where you have to go and visit your parents, and you don't want to be in a situation of being without a petrol. Also, a consumer may lack information. How do you know how long the crisis is going to last? Usually panic buying of petrol lasts just a few days, and after that time, well, everyone who wanted to buy petrol has bought it, and the queues dissipate, the suppliers catch up, and then there's plenty of petrol for everybody. But what about if you get it wrong? What about if a crisis lasts quite a few weeks, much longer than usual, and then you are in a situation of being without petrol? There's quite a high cost. So often it is rational for a consumer to respond to potential shortages by buying before it's too late. However, you could argue that some consumers get carried away. Whilst it might be rational to buy a few rolls of toilet paper, you don't necessarily need to buy the entire supermarket to last you for the next 2 years. This is taking risk-averse behaviour too far. So anyway, these are some of the issues behind panic buying. Some people suggest a better term is surge buying. They're just increasing their demand more than usual.